The sky was heavy with gray clouds that morning, and the city had just begun to drown beneath the relentless downpour. In front of a sprawling mansion framed by trimmed hedges and marble fountains, a woman in a faded blue uniform sat under a tree, her hair plastered to her face, her hands trembling as she tried to eat from a cheap plastic lunchbox. The rain poured harder, mixing with her tears. And yet, she didn't move, didn't seek shelter. Her food was getting soaked, her clothes clung to her body, and her small frame shivered from cold and exhaustion. She looked like someone who had forgotten what comfort felt like. That was the moment when he saw her, the men who owned that mansion, the men whose wealth could buy comfort for thousands. But what he discovered next shattered his heart in a way no loss of fortune ever could. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and giving people a second chance in life, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your one gesture can spread hope and love across the world. The man's name was Richard Hale, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. He had built an empire from scratch, but over time, his success had hardened him. He believed that money was the answer to everything: power, respect, happiness. He rarely noticed the people who worked for him. To him, maids, drivers, and gardeners were just background figures in the grand movie of his success. But that day, something about the sight of his maid, soaking wet under the tree, pierced through the wall of indifference he had built around his heart. Her name was Maria, quiet, obedient, and always early. He had never seen her complain, never seen her idle. But now she was sitting in the pouring rain, eating as if the world had forgotten her. Richard watched her for a while from his car, confused. Why would anyone choose to eat outside in such terrible weather when there was shelter just a few feet away? He had a comfortable kitchen with space for everyone. He stepped out of his car, his polished shoes sinking into the wet grass, and called out to her, but Maria didn't hear him. Or perhaps she didn't want to. When he finally approached, she quickly tried to stand, wiping her face and hiding her food as if she had done something wrong. The sight of her trembling hands unsettled him. He asked why she was sitting there, but she only whispered an apology, eyes fixed on the ground. Richard walked away without pressing further. But something in him refused to let it go. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus. His office meetings, his luxury calls, even the constant hum of his expensive watch. Everything faded behind the image of that woman eating in the rain. That night, while his family sat for dinner, he asked one of the senior staff members about Maria. The man hesitated, saying softly that Maria usually avoided the dining area and preferred to eat outside during her breaks. She says she doesn't want to disturb anyone, he said. That explanation didn't sit right with Richard. He decided to find out the truth himself. The next day, just before lunch, he quietly followed Maria from a distance. She carried a small lunchbox wrapped in a plastic bag and walked to the same tree in the garden. The sky was clearer that day, but the air still smelled of rain. She sat in the same spot as if that lonely patch of grass was her world. When she opened her lunch, Richard noticed it wasn't much, just some rice and beans, maybe leftovers from the day before. Her hands were calloused, her wrists thin. She ate slowly, as though savoring every grain. After a few minutes, he approached her again, this time with less authority and more curiosity. "Maria," he said softly, "why don't you eat inside? The staff room is warm and the rain is gone." She froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Then she lowered it, staring at her meal. Her voice came out shaky but calm. "Sir, I used to eat inside, but one day your guests came early. I was sitting in the corner and they said my uniform smelled like detergent and I shouldn't be near the dining area. I didn't want to embarrass you again, so since then I come out here." Her words sliced through him like a blade. Richard stood speechless. He couldn't remember that day, but the thought of someone being treated so poorly under his roof because of his status made him feel hollow. He noticed the way she forced a smile after finishing her explanation as if to comfort him. That smile broke something deep inside him. Over the next few days, Richard quietly observed Maria. He learned that she arrived 2 hours early every morning, not because she was told to, but because she walked a long distance from a small rented room at the edge of the city. Her husband had died in an accident years ago, and she was raising a young son alone. She worked multiple jobs, cleaning offices at night and working at Richard's mansion during the day. Despite her exhaustion, she was always kind, always gentle with others. When he realized she had been working through pain and hunger just to support her child's education, guilt washed over him like the same rain he had seen her endure. One afternoon, Richard decided to visit her neighborhood. It was far from the wealth and brightness of his world. The streets were narrow, the houses small and worn out. He saw children playing barefoot, and in one of those houses with cracked walls and a leaking roof, he found Maria's son sitting at a wooden table studying under a dim light. The boy looked up and smiled politely. On the wall behind him were his drawings of a doctor, a hospital, and a woman in a blue uniform. Richard realized the boy's dream was to become a doctor so he could help people like his mother. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He stared out his window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He thought about how he had built skyscrapers, but had never built kindness. He had millions in his bank account, but nothing that truly mattered in his heart. The next morning, he called Maria into his office. She stood nervously, unsure if she had done something wrong. But instead of scolding her, Richard handed her an envelope. Inside was a scholarship approval for her son, fully funded until graduation, and an offer letter for her to manage the housekeeping team with a higher salary. Her hands trembled as she read the paper, tears falling freely. "Sir, I don't know what to say," she whispered. Richard looked at her and said quietly, "You don't have to. Just promise me you'll never eat in the rain again." Weeks passed, and the mansion felt different. The air seemed warmer. The staff smiled more. And even Richard's own family began noticing his change. He spent more time talking to his workers, learning their names, their stories, their struggles. He realized that success without empathy is just emptiness in disguise. And every time he passed that tree in his garden, he remembered the day his heart had woken up under the rain. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world what it means to be human. Before we end, here's a small request. Comment below what lesson you learned from Maria's story. Was it kindness, humility, or the power of empathy? We'd love to hear from you. As the days went on, Maria's son graduated with honors years later, fulfilling his dream of becoming a doctor. On the day of his graduation, Richard sat proudly in the audience, clapping the loudest. When Maria thanked him, he only smiled and said, "You gave me more than I ever gave you. You reminded me what wealth truly means." And sometimes that's all it takes. One act of kindness, one moment of understanding, one look beneath the rain to change a heart forever.